I think it's interesting that the topic of rest comes up on Mother's Day, because if there's one group of people that probably know the least amount about rest, it's probably mothers. But anyway, nevertheless, that is our topic for today. So to practice rest, I'm going to ask everyone to put your head on your desk, and I need somebody to take names of anybody that, I don't know if you did that in school, where you put your head down on the desk, right? I was always the one that volunteered to take the names. One, because I didn't have to put my head on the desk. I could look around. Secondly, I wasn't going to take anybody's name. But rest is something that we don't really know a lot about. And really to exhaust the topic of rest, and primarily a Sabbath rest, it's a study that could take several weeks to really go in depth. But in the next 30 minutes, we're going to try to talk about rest just a little bit, and all we'll probably do is skip the stone across the top of the water. But maybe we can at least ignite some thought where you can go home and research this topic a little bit more. But more importantly, maybe there's some things you can implement to incorporate rest into your life. Let's start out with a test, though, and you probably know where this is headed, but don't get ahead of me here. Days of Creation. Do you remember those? There used to be a children's song that used body parts to help children recall the days of creation. I don't remember that song, nor would I sing it, but created on day one was what? Light and darkness. Light and darkness from chaos. Day two, incidentally, I have it written down here on my sheet of paper because I don't have it memorized. Day two, what was it? Y'all know this song, don't you? Patty, stand up, sing the song for us. The Sky and the Sea. Day three, land. Day four, no, not animals yet. Day four, no, not yet. Sun and the moon. Sun and moon and stars. Maybe there were plants growing on the sun and the moon and stars. Now we're getting down to living stuff. Day five. Right, the fishes and the sea. The birds and fish and the sea. All right, day six. Animals, man, and woman. All on day six. Now we get to our topic. On day seven, what was created? Nothing was created. God rested. I find that to be a really interesting passage, and I really don't know, because the text doesn't tell us, did God just rest on the seventh day, and then the next day it was back at work again? And what exactly did he do on the day to follow? Well, God rested. If you read the text, he spoke all these things into existence. I don't know how much energy that takes. I mean, God, who is all-powerful and able to do everything, and is able to speak the sun and the moon and the stars, just speak them into existence. Be honest. Doesn't seem like you need to take a nap after that. Seems to be kind of easy. So for 6 days he worked, but on the seventh day he rested, but that's exactly what he did. So the question comes up, what does it mean? We got mics around here, so just give me your thoughts. And all of our thoughts right now are going to be pretty much uneducated thoughts. It's just whatever we think, because we don't really know. But what does it mean for God to rest? I know it pictures when I ask you, are you well rested? Or did you rest well last night? Or do you need to go take a rest now? I know what that means for us. But what does it mean when we hear that God rested? What do you think of? What picture do you have? Okay, so he did not create. Right, he did not create. Okay, so it's more of what he didn't do on that day. All right, anybody else? What does it mean for God to rest? Yes, yeah. Not a topic we think about very often, is it? All right.
Okay. Is it on? Yes, okay. So, if I could go back and relive my life, I would learn a second language.
Okay.
Be Hebrew. It doesn't really say he rested. It said he sabbat. He stopped.
Okay. And that's exactly what it means. And that's what we're going to get into, is he stopped working. He stopped doing what he was doing and took time out. Now, when you go through the days of creation, at the end of each one of those days, we're told by text that God stopped and he looked at it and he said, oh, that's good. But when he got to the end of the sixth day, what stands out about his description about the sixth day? Right. It said it's very good. Seems to be an adjective in there to set the sixth day apart from the other. Have you ever finished a big project and you just stood back and looked at it? You ever built a deck and then when you get through with it, you fix your meal and you go out there and you sit at the table and you just admire your work? Maybe you invite people over to see something that you've just completed, a big project. So God is able to stand back and he's able to look at his creation, but he rested. Now, just something to just put down a little marker here is no place in any of the passages, in any of the scriptures, are we ever going to find where God, where it's God's intention for mankind nor himself to be restless, to be involved in restlessness. Rest is certainly a part of God's plan, a part of God's creation. Restlessness is not. So I wonder, when God rests, what did he do? Did he take a nap? Did he speak into existence a movie and then sat down and watched that movie and just kind of chill out for a little while? Did he sleep? An interesting story that we find in 1 Kings 18. Here's the story of Elijah. You remember as he goes up against the prophets of Baal, and he's testing the prophets. That story is not the object of our lesson, so we're not going to go into detail about it, but I find something really interesting about this story as we look at what does it mean for God to rest. In this story, as the prophets of Baal call upon Baal to come in and slaughter the calves and to work, Elijah kind of taunts them. Let's see. Let me get on to this next one. Okay, never mind. All right, let's hold it right there for a minute. But anyway, as Elijah taunts them, this is what he says. This is from 1 Kings 18. He says, and at noon Elijah mocked the prophets, saying, cry aloud, for he is a God who is either musing, or he's relieving himself, or he's on a journey, or perhaps he's asleep and must be awakened. And so he tells them, you got to make more noise because your God may be sleeping. Imagine serving a God who's where there's possibility of him sleeping. But our God doesn't sleep. And that was part of Elijah's point, is that God does not sleep. And so God blessed the seventh day and he made it holy because on it God rested. That's Sabbath. He rested from all of his work that he had done in creation. Stephanie, I think you're right. It's a matter of what he did not do on that day. He stopped and he rested, but he consecrated this day as a holy day, and he created man to live in this world that he had made, to be subject to all the natural laws of this world. But then he said, something you've got to incorporate into your life, and that's this idea of rest. The word for rest, or sabbat here, literally means to stop. It means a time that that God himself stopped. He stopped creating. He stopped what he was doing so that way he could look over what he had done and he could really appreciate it. In our lives, it's not uncommon for us to want to stop, to take a day off after a large project, or to take a time off after completing a big task, just to look at what we've accomplished. But God set this Sabbath as a holy time. Would you say that we practice a Sabbath in our lives as a holy time? Have we maintained this? Have we continued this? Now, we can get into a discussion about the seventh day, about the Sabbath day, about keeping the Sabbath. That's a whole different discussion. What's not a part of this discussion is, did God ever say, okay, what I don't want you to do anymore is rest. I want you guys to work all the time. Busy yourselves as much as you can. Never let there be an idle moment in your life. And rest, Sabbath, is not to be confused with taking a nap. In fact, a Sabbath, where we stop and reflect on all that God has done and create rest as a holy part of God's creation, is actually a time of high spiritual energy. Do we spend time in high spiritual energy taking a rest? So what would a spiritual rest look like for us? If we practiced a Sabbath in our life, or for those of you that do practice a Sabbath in your life, a holy time. And let's go back to the garden. That was a place of rest. It was a place of Sabbath. You remember on that day when God placed Adam and Eve in the garden? This is before work was created. It's before the curse of labor was imposed on mankind. It was a place where there was constant communion with God. A place where God and his creation could live in harmony, in rhythm with each other. In fact, in a little bit, we're going to talk about how Jesus called people back into the rhythm of creation, the rhythm of living in that harmony with God. So what does a time of spiritual high energy look like for us? What would it look like? But being a rest at the same time. Thoughts. Microphones are ready. Have you thought about that? Yes, Karen.
The first thing that comes to my mind in what you are explaining is our worship, our corporate worship together on Sunday morning.
Okay. All right. And that's really what Jason was saying today, wasn't it? Is our life becomes worship when we spend it in time reflecting on who God is and our relationship with God, the harmony that our lives have with God. Anybody else? What does Sabbath look like? Yeah, family. Okay, so it's a stillness, but it's a stillness that we experience in harmony with God. So it's that vertical move of us towards God, isn't it? So that takes focus, doesn't it? It takes energy. It's not something just happens. So this keeps us from equating rest with a nap. Because rest isn't just a cessation of work, but it's rechanneling the energy that we spend every day doing other things. It's channeling that energy towards God. Yeah. Okay,
because my brain won't turn off.
all
When
right.
I'm at home on Sunday, and I'm thinking about what I've got to do Monday, what I should be doing instead of sitting there in the recliner. I think the world has made us to where we can't turn off.
Okay, good point. Anybody else, can you sympathize with that? Can you relate to that? That it's hard to turn your brain off? It's hard to kind of kick it into just that vertical relationship with God? Or is our life so cluttered that we can just constantly hear that echo in our mind of the things that we need to do?
It's because it's against our nature.
Okay,
Like you said, it's against our nature, so it is a willful surrender.
okay.
To be still and know is a willful surrender that's why it takes so much focus, because it is against our nature.
Right, right. It is against our nature, but is this a nature that we have created for ourselves? Or is this something that's born in us that we can't help? Yeah. Right. Some of this could be of our own creation. There's an author, you may know him, Dallas Willard. There's a quote that I think is a great quote. He said, "You must ruthlessly eliminate hurry from your life. There's nothing else. Hurry is the greatest enemy of spiritual life in our day. You must ruthlessly eliminate hurry from your life." You agree or you disagree? All right, let's go over here. They're coming to you. I think we're down to one mic. Oh, okay. He's got the other one. Okay, good.
Well, coming from Belize
Yeah.
this past week, the hurry is U.S. created.
Okay.
Our society has created that. Belizeans, if you remember,
Oh, yeah.
and other countries like it, operate on a very slow pace of, at least in the areas that we were in. And so, when we say, oh, service is at this time, well,
Mate.
they show up when or meal is at this time, and so we're very used to it. Well, why aren't they here? Well, we're ready to get started, and that's not how they operate. So we in the U.S. have created,
Right.
so by our nature, but it is not a human
Human
nature
nature.
necessarily.
Okay. Might say it's a first world creation, right? Yeah.
Kind of parallel to what's being said. I think of Chick-fil-A. Like their food, don't like their food. They're closed one day a week.
Right.
And I know the owners have a Christian faith. I don't know the specifics of it, but you think about how our society nearly revolted, like demanding that they open on that day. So we have these intense pressures put on us to not be intentional about resting. And so, yeah, like how do we carve out that time? And knowing that people can look at us and say, you're being selfish by not doing something right now.
Right, right. Yeah, in fact, it's interesting you bring up Chick-fil-A. Sitting in my notes says it's going to be free. But I got a chance to meet Truett Cathy at one time. He's the founder of Chick-fil-A. Got invited to their corporate office 10 o'clock one Monday morning because for his corporate office, 10 o'clock every Monday morning, they stop. Thought and prayer together as a corporate office. So among corporate America, that's unheard of because productivity is the drive. And what Mr. Cathy said was that for all the people that are out in the field working corporate, that at 10 o'clock on Monday morning, they were not to schedule things if at all possible, but they too were to stop and spend time. And there's reflection on God and on God's principle and to keep their corporation Christ-centered. And so that's when I became a Chick-fil-A fan. But what Dallas Willard is saying here is he said that we've got to ruthlessly eliminate hurry from our life. What he's saying is that this is something that we have created. This is something we have control over. Our busyness is not just something that happens around us. It's something that we allow to happen. It invades our life. So we start talking about rest, when we start talking about a Sabbath in our life, maybe we need to, maybe step number one is understanding we do have more control over this than we think that we do. Another quote, this comes from John Mark Comer, and there's a book, The Ruthless Elimination of Hurry. Ran across this quote. There's just a portion of it on the screen. This is what he says: hurry kills relationships. Love takes time. Hurry doesn't have it. It kills joy, gratitude, appreciation. People in a rush don't have time to enter the goodness of the moment. It kills wisdom because wisdom is born in the quiet, the slow. Wisdom has its own pace. It makes you wait for it. Hurry kills all that we hold dear. Spirituality, health, marriage, family, thoughtful work, creativity, and generosity. Hurry is a sociopathic predator loose in our society. Those are strong words. Do you agree? If we agree with that, then this could point at perhaps one of the greatest sins that's invading the church today. Now, I think if Satan wants to win the war that he's in with God, it's not that he has to go and tempt each one of us to enter into overt sin, because we're much too sharp for that. We know all the commands, don't we? We know all the do nots. We know a lot of the do's. But all he has to do is keep us busy where we don't spend time on the Sabbath rest that God himself instituted and God himself did before anybody else did, where he stops and rests and looks at all that has been created. We don't know some of the things that God is doing in our culture because we don't stop and reflect on it often enough. Crandall?
One of the things that I think is part of my life is failing to turn things over to God.
Right.
We do our work, and yet we hurry and hurry and hurry because we don't turn it over to God. We don't step back and let God handle the things that are bothering us.
Right.
And too many times I think that's us as a society. We need to step back and let God do his job once we do ours.
Right. Well, our anxiety level is high right now as a culture. Our anxiety life is really at a high, even among religious circles right now, because with all the things that are going wrong, we have to fix it, don't we? Because we don't turn things over to God enough. And it's like Michael said during communion thoughts today, perhaps unintentionally, and without saying it just out loud saying it, sometimes perhaps maybe we can think of our God as being a little bit too small. But again, that may go back because we have not spent enough time reflecting upon the work, the nature, and the creation of God. Sabbath is probably a lost discipline. Out of all the things we've studied through this, through the spiritual discipline study, probably rest is the one that we as a church, that we as a culture, that we as people need to focus on more than anything else, because to spend time in reflection on God's Word and on God's presence. You know, we can, if you really want to raise the anxiety of an American right now, let them lose their phone for about 10 minutes. We'll do everything we can to find those phones, won't we? And go and sit in a doctor's office or any place where there's a queue where you have to wait. What's everybody doing? They're on their phones. How many times have you been with someone and a conversation be interrupted because, oh, I got to take this, or I got to return this text, or I've got to look that up? You know, we have more knowledge at our disposal now than we've ever. We don't have to research anymore. All we have to do is go to our phones, go to our media, and we don't know what it's like to just turn off. You know, when was the last time you ever just disconnected and just spent time watching the sun rise, the sun set? This is one thing I love about deer season. It's the one time in my year that I am forced into total solitude and disconnect. Because you sit there in a tree, and I know this doesn't sound appealing to everybody, but you've got your own way of doing it, I hope. But all of a sudden, all the pressures and the hurry of life just come to a screeching halt. And your mind does kind of race for a little while, but then after a while you begin to disconnect and focus in. And you begin seeing things that you would not see if you were preoccupied with the restlessness of life. So rest, it's not just a cessation of the work that we do. That's where the Jews got it wrong. You should read the Old Testament. They made a law about you couldn't get your ox out of it. All just other stuff that you could not do because you could not work. But it's not just not doing work. It's a reflection, as God did, on all that He's created, on the very nature, on the creative ability of God, on the presence of God. I just think that I personally, maybe you, would be more blessed if we would just take time out for a Sabbath. How much restlessness is there in our life that's just simply a matter of choice? Because we don't know any way around it. We don't know how not to be restless. Faith and worship are in a battle with our hurried lives right now. We see this even in church. I don't know how many checked the clock already. We got 3 minutes left. Make sure we stay on time, Anita, because we got these schedules that we've got to keep. We don't relax enough. Do we take time for reflection? Do we take time for meditation? The drive that we have not to be bored could actually be driving us in some really dark places. So we need to be spending time in the presence of God. So this passage, it was referred to, Michael referred to it this morning from Matthew 11. I really like what Matthew 11 says. This is from the Message. The translation I'll read from is from the Message. Now, these are the words of Jesus, okay? So they should carry extra weight. Are you tired? Are you worn out? Are you burned out on religion even? And Jesus says, come to me. Get away with me and you'll recover your life. I'll show you how to take a real rest. Walk with me and work with me. Watch how I do it. Learn the unforced rhythms of grace. I won't lay anything heavy or ill-fitting on you. Keep company with me, and you'll learn to live freely and lightly. What he says is learn the unforced rhythm of grace. What Jesus is saying is, I came to show you how to live this life. Did Jesus have a lot of things to stress over? Sure he did. But he also knew the size of God. And he was willing to say to God, not your will, but not my will, but your will be done. I'm going to get into the rhythm of God. And that's what Jesus said. If you'll walk with me, learn how I make choices. Learn my priorities in life. That's the reason I'm here. Learn to get in rhythm with the way that I live my life. And your life will be blessed. He starts out by saying, are you tired? So by implication, he's saying, you won't be tired anymore. You won't be worn out. You won't be burned out on religion. You won't have the spiritual vacuum in your life or even the social vacuum in your life that so many feel. He said, learn to live life like I do. Learn the rhythm of life from me. Learn my lifestyle. So, if you're to discover rest, if rest is to be a part of one of our spiritual disciplines, we're going to have to seek the meaningful times with God and say no to some of the mindless activities that's killing our Sabbath time. So, homework for this next week, have a Sabbath. It's good for us. All right, thank you. Happy Mother's Day.